The stagecoach rattled into Silverwater, Wyoming territory, in the spring of 1878, bringing with it a cloud of dust, and Olivia Evans, a mail-order bride who hadn't spoken a single word since stepping off the vehicle. Her new husband-to-be had taken one look at her silence, declared her defective merchandise, and abandoned her at the station with nothing but her trunk, and a letter informing her that the arrangement was terminated. The townsfolk watched from the wooden boardwalks as the young woman with auburn hair stood motionless in the street, her green eyes wide with uncertainty. 22 years old and thousands of miles from her Boston home, Olivia clutched her small valise as whispers circulated around her. Poor thing's mute as a fence post. Simmons paid good money for damaged goods. What's a woman worth if she can't even speak? Isaac Bentley observed the scene from the doorway of his smithy, wiping soot-covered hands on his leather apron. At 26, he'd spent the last 5 years as Silverwater's blacksmith after returning from the war. The tall, broad-shouldered man ran a hand through his sandy brown hair as he watched the abandoned bride's shoulders slump under the weight of public scrutiny. "Mrs. Patterson," Isaac called to the older woman who ran the boarding house across the street. "Looks like that lady could use some assistance." The plump proprietress crossed her arms. "What would I do with a mute girl? Can't work the front desk if she can't talk to the guests." Isaac frowned as more townspeople began to gather around Olivia. Her delicate features had gone pale, and though she made no sound, her breathing had quickened noticeably. Without another word to Mrs. Patterson, he strode across the dusty street. "That's enough gawking," he announced firmly, positioning himself between Olivia and the onlookers. "Madam, I'm Isaac Bentley, town blacksmith. Let me help you with your things." Olivia's startled eyes met his, and she gave a slight nod. Isaac hefted her trunk with ease, carrying it toward his shop. "I've got a spare room above the smithy," he explained as she followed tentatively. "You can stay there until you sort things out." The crowd dispersed with disappointed murmurs, deprived of their afternoon entertainment. Isaac led Olivia through his workshop, with its familiar sense of coal smoke, hot metal, and leather, then up the narrow staircase to the living quarters above. "It's not much," he said, setting down her trunk in a small but clean bedroom, "but it's private." Olivia stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of wariness and gratitude. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small slate and chalk. After a moment's hesitation, she wrote carefully, "Thank you, Mr. Bentley, I can pay." Isaac shook his head. "No need for that right now. You've had a rough welcome to Silverwater. Rest up. We'll figure things out tomorrow." After showing her where to find water and towels, Isaac left her to settle in and return to his work below. The rhythmic clanging of his hammer on metal continued until dusk, when he cleaned up and headed upstairs to prepare a simple supper. He found Olivia sitting by the window, gazing out at the town as the last light faded. She had changed into a simple blue dress, her auburn hair freed from its tight traveling bun and falling in waves past her shoulders. "Hungry?" he asked, and she nodded, following him to the small kitchen table. Over a meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee, Isaac watched as Olivia wrote on her slate. "Why are you helping me?" he considered her question, noting the intelligence in her green eyes. "My sister was born unable to hear or speak. Folks weren't always kind to her either." Olivia's expression softened. She wrote again. "I can hear, I just can't speak since the fever." Recent, she shook her head and wrote, "6 years ago, I was 16. Isaac nodded, understanding dawning, and the man who sent for you didn't know. Olivia's cheeks colored as she wrote, "I told him in my letters. He said it didn't matter until he saw me." Isaac's jaw tightened. Gerald Simmons never was a man of his word. He paused, then asked gently, "What will you do now?" Olivia stared at her slate for a long moment before writing, "I don't know. I have nowhere to go." "Silverwater's not a bad place," Isaac said. "Once you get past the gossips, there's work to be found if you're willing." That night, after Olivia had retired to her room, Isaac sat alone by the stove, turning over the day's events in his mind. There was something about the quiet dignity in the way Olivia carried herself that stirred him. He'd seen plenty of frontier hardship, but abandoning a woman who'd traveled thousands of miles on a promise seemed particularly cruel. The next morning, Isaac found Olivia already awake and dressed in a simple work dress, her hair neatly braided. She had prepared coffee and was writing on her slate when he entered the kitchen. "I can sew, cook, keep accounts, and read well," the slate read. "I need work." Isaac smiled at her determination. "Let's find you something then." They began at the general store, where the owner, Harold Turner, looked skeptical when Isaac explained Olivia's situation. "I need someone who can call out prices and chat with customers," Turner said dismissively. "What good is a shop girl who can't speak?" Isaac felt Olivia stiffen beside him, but was impressed when she calmly wrote on her slate and held it up. "I can keep your books in better order than they are now." Turner's eyes narrowed. "And how would you know the state of my books, Miss Evans?" She wrote again. "Your price board has 3 mathematical errors. You're undercharging for flour and overcharging for coffee beans." Turner sputtered as Isaac suppressed a smile. 3 more businesses turned them away before they reached the schoolhouse at the edge of town. The teacher, Miss Winters, was a stern woman in her 40s who adjusted her spectacles as she considered Olivia. "I do need an assistant," she admitted. "The school's growing faster than I can manage. Can you write well enough to teach the younger children their letters?" Olivia nodded eagerly, and Isaac felt a surge of hope. But Miss Winters frowned. The school board would never approve a teacher who can't speak. The parents would object. Olivia's shoulders slumped, but she wrote a polite thank you on her slate before turning away. By midday, they had visited every business in town with no success. They paused outside the saloon, where piano music and boisterous laughter spilled into the street. "One more try," Isaac said, gesturing to the millinery shop across the way. "Mrs. Holden might need help with her sewing." The elderly milliner studied Olivia through rheumy eyes. "I could use a pair of young hands," she admitted. "My eyesight isn't what it was, but I need someone who can talk to the customers about styles and such." Olivia wrote quickly. "I can show them with my hands and designs." "I have an eye for fashion." Mrs. Holden hesitated. "I don't know. Give her a chance," Isaac urged. "1 week. If it doesn't work out, no hard feelings." The old woman sighed. "All right, 1 week. Starting tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp." Outside the shop, Olivia's face broke into a genuine smile for the first time since her arrival. She wrote excitedly, "Thank you for advocating for me. You earned that chance yourself," Isaac replied, oddly pleased by her smile. "How about we celebrate with a proper meal at the hotel restaurant?" The Silverwater Hotel dining room fell silent as they entered, all eyes turning to observe the mute mail-order bride and the blacksmith. Isaac steered Olivia to a corner table, shielding her from the stares as best he could. "Folks will get used to you," he said quietly. "It just takes time." Their meal was interrupted when Gerald Simmons entered with several ranch hands. The balding man in his 40s spotted Olivia and made his way to their table, whiskey fumes preceding him. "Well, if it isn't the defective merchandise," he drawled, swaying slightly. "Found yourself a new prospect already. Better warn him you can't even scream his name." Isaac stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. "That's enough, Simmons. Just warning a fellow man about damaged goods," Simmons sneered. "The only damage I see is to your character," Isaac replied, his voice dangerously low. "Miss Evans is a lady deserving of respect, something you clearly know nothing about." The other diners watched with interest as Simmons' face reddened. "You threatening me, blacksmith? Just stating facts." "Now move along before you embarrass yourself further." Simmons glared at them both before stalking away, muttering curses. Isaac righted his chair and sat down, noticing Olivia's trembling hands. "I'm sorry about that," he said gently. She wrote slowly. "Not your fault. Thank you for defending me." "No man should speak to a woman that way," Isaac replied, his anger still evident. "Especially not one he made promises to." They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, and as they walked back to the smithy in the fading light, Isaac found himself increasingly aware of Olivia's presence beside him, the slight floral scent that surrounded her, the graceful way she moved, despite her circumstances. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Olivia proved herself an asset at the millinery shop, her skilled fingers creating hat designs that attracted customers from neighboring towns. Mrs. Holden grudgingly admitted that Olivia's slate and expressive gestures worked just fine for communicating with customers, many of whom found her silence intriguing rather than off-putting. In the evenings, Isaac and Olivia shared quiet meals in his quarters above the smithy. He taught her the basics of blacksmithing, amused by her fascination with the craft. She, in turn, mended his clothes and organized his chaotic living space. They developed a comfortable routine, communicating through her slate, gestures, and expressions that became increasingly familiar to Isaac. One evening, Isaac returned from delivering a repaired plow to find Olivia teaching sign language to Sally, the 8-year-old daughter of the butcher. The little girl was giggling as she attempted to copy Olivia's fluid hand movements. "Miss Evans is teaching me to talk with my hands," Sally announced when she saw Isaac. "It's like a secret code." Isaac leaned against the doorframe, watching Olivia's patient instruction. "Is that so? She says she can teach you too, Mr. Bentley," Sally continued. "Then you can talk to her without the slate." Later, after Sally had gone home, Isaac found Olivia preparing supper. "Would you really teach me?" he asked. "Your signs, I mean." Her face lit up and she nodded enthusiastically. That night began their lessons, with Olivia carefully guiding Isaac's calloused hands through the shapes and movements that formed words. His large fingers felt clumsy compared to her delicate ones, but he persisted, determined to learn her language. As spring turned to summer, the townsfolk gradually became accustomed to Olivia's presence. Mrs. Holden boasted about her assistant's talents to anyone who would listen, and several of the local children had picked up basic signs from watching Olivia communicate. Even so, whispers and sidelong glances followed her, especially from those who considered her silence unnatural. The announcement of the town's annual Founders' Day dance caused a stir of excitement throughout Silverwater. Posters appeared on every storefront, promising music, food, and merriment to celebrate the town's 20th anniversary. "Will you attend the dance?" Isaac asked Olivia one evening as they sat on the porch steps, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. She hesitated, then signed slowly so he could follow. What place does a woman who cannot speak have at a dance? Isaac had grown proficient enough in sign language to understand her most common expressions, though they still relied on the slate for complex conversations. "The same place as anyone else," he replied, attempting to sign back. "To enjoy the music and company." Olivia smiled at his efforts but shook her head, writing on her slate, "People already stare enough. A dance would only invite more mockery." The subject was dropped, but Isaac found himself thinking about it as he worked the forge over the next few days. He had come to admire Olivia's quiet strength, her expressive eyes that communicated so much without words, and the graceful movements of her hands when she signed. Something protective and tender had grown in him, feelings he hadn't experienced since before the war. The night of the Founders' Day dance arrived with perfect early summer weather. Lanterns illuminated the town square, and a platform had been erected for the musicians. Tables laden with food lined one side of the square, while couples already spun to the lively fiddle music. Isaac, dressed in his best shirt and freshly polished boots, knocked on Olivia's door. She opened it wearing her everyday dress, clearly not planning to attend. "I thought we might make an appearance," he said, signing along as best he could, "just for a little while." Olivia shook her head, gesturing to her clothes and then writing, "I have nothing suitable." "About that," Isaac replied with a slight smile. He stepped aside to reveal Mrs. Holden holding a dress of deep blue fabric that shimmered in the lamplight. "Every young woman deserves a pretty dress for a dance," the milliner said. "Miss Evans has more than earned this with her work." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she touched the beautiful garment. She signed "thank you" repeatedly, embracing the older woman. "Well, don't just stand there," Mrs. Holden said gruffly, though her eyes were soft. "Put it on, we have a dance to attend." An hour later, Isaac stood speechless as Olivia emerged in the blue dress, her auburn hair arranged in loose curls with blue ribbons woven through them. She looked uncertain, clutching her slate nervously. "You look beautiful," Isaac signed, his hands moving slowly but with certainty. They walked to the town square, where the celebration was in full swing. Conversations paused as they arrived, eyes turning to observe the unlikely pair. Olivia's grip on Isaac's arm tightened as whispers began to circulate. The mute girl's got nerve showing up here. How's she going to dance if she can't hear the calls? Waste of a pretty dress on a broken woman. Isaac felt Olivia begin to retreat, but before she could turn away, a small figure darted through the crowd toward them. "Miss Evans," Sally called, her face alight with excitement. "You came. You look like a princess." The little girl grabbed Olivia's hand, pulling her toward a group of children. "Miss Evans can talk with her hands," Sally announced proudly to her friends. "She's teaching me too." The children surrounded Olivia, asking her to show them different signs. As she demonstrated, their small hands awkwardly copied her movements, accompanied by giggles and exclamations of delight. Isaac watched from a distance, smiling at the scene. Mrs. Patterson sidled up beside him, observing Olivia with the children. "Never would have thought it," the boarding house owner remarked. "Those little ones don't seem to mind her condition." "There's nothing wrong with her condition," Isaac replied evenly. "She just communicates differently than most." As the evening progressed, Olivia remained with the children while Isaac mingled with the townsfolk, keeping her within his sight. The music shifted to a slower waltz, and the dance floor filled with couples. Gerald Simmons, who had been drinking steadily, staggered toward Olivia with a mocking bow. "How about a dance, silent beauty?" He slurred loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Not like you'll be stepping on my toes with conversation." The children scattered as Simmons reached for Olivia's arm. She stepped back, her face flushing with humiliation as onlookers watched the scene unfold. Isaac moved swiftly across the square, intercepting Simmons before he could touch her. "The lady doesn't want to dance with you," Isaac said firmly, positioning himself between them. "Lady," Simmons scoffed. "A real lady can at least say no thank you when a man asks her to dance." A hush fell over the gathering as Isaac's expression hardened. "Miss Evans says more with silence than most say with 1,000 words. Now move along, Simmons." The rancher sneered but retreated under Isaac's unwavering gaze. The crowd slowly turned back to their conversations, but the damage was done. Olivia stood rigid, her eyes downcast, the slate clutched tightly in her hands. Without a word, Isaac gently took the slate from her and set it on a nearby table. He extended his hand to her, bowing slightly as the musicians began a new waltz. Olivia looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "May I have this dance?" Isaac signed, his movements deliberate and clear for all to see. Olivia hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. Isaac led her to the center of the dance floor, aware of the stares following them. He placed one hand respectfully at her waist, holding her other hand gently in his. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, knowing she could read his lips. As the music swelled, Isaac guided Olivia in a simple waltz. Her initial stiffness gradually melted away as they moved together, finding a rhythm that required no words. He held her gaze, communicating his admiration and support through his eyes and the steady pressure of his hand at her waist. The crowd watched in silence as the blacksmith and the mute woman glided across the dance floor. There was an undeniable grace to their movements, a harmony that transcended speech. Slowly, other couples joined them, the dance floor filling once more. Isaac drew Olivia closer as they danced, their bodies moving in perfect synchrony. "You see," he said softly, "no words needed." A small smile curved her lips, and in that moment, Isaac knew with certainty what his heart had been telling him for weeks. This woman, with her quiet strength and expressive eyes, had become essential to him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. As the music faded, they remained in their dance position, reluctant to break the connection. The crowd's applause brought them back to awareness, and Isaac was surprised to see approving nods and smiles directed their way. Sally ran up to them, beaming. "You dance so pretty, Miss Evans." Just like in a storybook. Olivia knelt to sign thank you to the little girl, her cheeks flushed with pleasure. When she stood, Isaac offered her his arm, leading her to the refreshment table. They were approached by several townspeople who seemed to view Olivia with new eyes after witnessing their dance. "That was mighty fine dancing, Miss Evans," Mayor Collins said, tipping his hat. "We're pleased to have you in Silverwater." As the evening wound down, Isaac and Olivia walked slowly back to the smithy under a canopy of stars. The streets were quiet, most residents still celebrating in the town square. When they reached the porch steps, Olivia turned to face Isaac, her eyes shining in the moonlight. She signed carefully, "Thank you for making me feel like I belong." Isaac caught her hands gently in his expression serious. "You do belong, Olivia, right here." Her breath caught at his use of her first name. Isaac moved closer, releasing her hands to sign, "I care for you deeply." Olivia's eyes widened, and after a heartbeat of hesitation, she signed back, "I care for you too." Isaac cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" he whispered, signing simultaneously. Her answer came not in signs, but in the slight movement forward, her hands resting on his chest as she tilted her face up to his. Their lips met in a tender kiss that spoke volumes without a single word, conveying months of growing affection and understanding. When they parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought silence could be so eloquent," he murmured, "until I met you." In the weeks that followed, Silverwater witnessed a courtship unlike any they had seen before. Isaac learned sign language with dedicated practice, his hands growing more fluent each day. Olivia continued her work at the millinery shop, where Mrs. Holden had promoted her to partner after several of Olivia's designs were commissioned by wealthy customers from as far away as Cheyenne. They were married that autumn in a ceremony attended by the entire town. Isaac had crafted a special wedding band for Olivia, the metal forming delicate intertwined hands a symbol of their unique connection. When the Reverend asked Isaac to recite his vows, he spoke them aloud while simultaneously signing each word, causing tears to well in Olivia's eyes. Olivia's vows were delivered entirely in sign language, with Sally proudly translating for the congregation. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as the little girl solemnly announced, "Mr. Bentley, you heard me when I was silent. You saw me when others looked away. I give you my hands, my heart, and my life." Their first dance as husband and wife mirrored their dance at the Founders' Day celebration. But this time they moved without hesitation, their bodies communicating with perfect understanding. The townsfolk watched with approval as Isaac held his bride close, whispering words only she could read on his lips. By the following spring, Olivia had established a small school for deaf and hard-of-hearing children from the surrounding areas. Parents who had once hidden away their afflicted children now brought them to Silverwater, where Olivia taught them to communicate through sign language. Isaac built an addition to the smithy to accommodate the growing school and crafted special tools that Olivia designed for teaching. Gerald Simmons left Silverwater that year, his ranch purchased by a family with a deaf son who had enrolled in Olivia's school. The town that had once whispered about the mute mail-order bride now pointed with pride to the thriving school that drew visitors from territories away. On their first anniversary, Isaac presented Olivia with a music box he had commissioned from a craftsman in Denver. Though she couldn't hear the melody, Olivia could feel the vibrations when she placed her hands on its surface. Isaac had the craftsman inscribe the lid with words that had become their personal motto, "True language lies in the heart." That night, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Olivia placed Isaac's hand on her abdomen, her eyes conveying the message before her fingers signed the words, "We're going to have a baby." Isaac's face transformed with joy as he gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the love words could never fully express. As darkness fell over Silverwater, the blacksmith and his wife sat entwined on the porch swing, communicating in the silent language they had created together, a language of touch, of understanding, and of love that transcended the need for spoken words. 5 years later, the Bentley home bustled with activity. 3-year-old twins James and Emma chased each other around the large kitchen while their 4-year-old brother Thomas carefully signed a story to his mother. Olivia's school had grown to include 20 students, with a new teacher, a deaf woman from Philadelphia, recently arrived to help with the expanding enrollment. Isaac entered from the smithy, his arms laden with toys he had crafted for the children. The family that had begun with a silent woman abandoned at a stagecoach stop had blossomed into a household filled with both spoken words and flying fingers, laughter and expressive faces. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Isaac and Olivia still danced together in their kitchen, moving to music only they could hear the rhythm of their hearts beating in unison, the melody of a love that had found its voice in silence.